COMW Podcast. Today's episode is special. Are you in love or obsessed? Want to understand the difference between limerence and real connection? Then it's time. Come with us to learn once and for all.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're here again to dig into those big psychological ideas and hopefully make them useful for, everyday life.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you this. Have you ever been completely, utterly wrapped up in thoughts about someone? Maybe someone you don't even know that well?
Mm-hmm.
Like a colleague? Or maybe just someone you see online. And you're spending, hours just building these, mental movies.
Fantasies, yeah, where they finally see you or your lives magically click together.
Right. And they sort of solve everything. That intense feeling.
It's incredibly intense, exhausting too, right? And a lot of people, especially when they're younger, they think this is it. This is peak romance, this overwhelming passion.
Yeah, it feels like the real deal.
But that's kind of the mission for our deep dive today, that incredibly intense feeling, the one that makes you feel super alive, but also desperately anxious at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It might actually have a specific name. And, well, that name probably isn't love.
Okay, you've got my attention. What is it then?
That name is limerence. And we kind of have to give a spoiler right up front here.
Go on.
This really obsessive state, this emotional roller coaster where your whole mood swings based on whether they liked your photo or texted you back.
Oh, I know that feeling.
Yeah. That's usually not about genuine connection. It's more like an attachment to an idea.
An idea.
Specifically, an idealized version of a person that, you, the listener, have basically built up entirely inside your own head.
Okay, we need to unpack that because, it sounds a bit like just having a big crush, doesn't it?
It does sound similar, and that's why the distinction is so important. The standard definition talks about limerence being this mental state,
right,
resulting from strong feelings, romantic or even non-romantic, for someone else. And it's marked by these, intrusive, obsessive thoughts, really detailed fantasies.
And that desperate need for them to feel the same way back, right? Reciprocation.
Exactly, that desperate drive for reciprocation.
But hold on, isn't all early attraction a bit idealized? When you first start liking someone, you definitely project good stuff onto them. So where's the line? When does a normal crush tip over into this limerence thing?
That's a really good question, a necessary one. The difference, the real crux of it, lies in the obsessive quality.
Obsessive.
And crucially, the resistance to reality. Look, a normal crush is exciting, it's fun, you get butterflies. But it doesn't usually, derail your entire life.
Right, you still focus on work or, sleep.
Exactly. Limerence, though, it's all-consuming. It's when your whole inner world just gets completely dominated by thoughts of this other person, the limerent object, as they call it.
So it's not just about how strong the feeling is. The key thing is that the person in limerence is actually more attached to the version of the person in their head.
A fantasy version.
Than they are to the actual, real, probably flawed person who's right there. It's like protecting the fantasy matters more than anything.
Precisely. And that's where it becomes actively harmful to any chance of, real connection, because you end up prioritizing keeping that perfect, safe fantasy bubble intact in your mind over the actual messy interactions you have with them in the real world. The real person almost becomes an inconvenience, a disruption to the movie.
And you can see this play out, right? You might get weirdly frustrated or even pick a fight with them because they did something.
Something out of character.
The perfect version of your head would never do.
Or maybe even more subtly, you stop taking in new information about them if it doesn't fit the script.
Like if they admit they're really messy or have some political view you hate.
Exactly. And that fact totally clashes with the perfect image you've built. You just kind of discard it, ignore it. You need them to be the idea you fell for, not the actual complicated human.
It's like you're curating the data to fit the fantasy.
That's a great way to put it. Researchers basically say limerence is fundamentally about maintaining an illusion, protecting that internal narrative.
Okay, and we start tying this into attachment patterns. how we learn to relate to people based on our early life. This gets even deeper, doesn't it?
It really does, because some researchers suggest that for people who already have insecure attachment styles,
Like anxious attachment or maybe
Yeah.
fearful avoidant.
exactly those, for them, a huge percentage of the really intense romantic feelings they experience might actually be limerence, not that grounded, secure connection.
Wow. So why is that? What's the link with anxious attachment?
Well, think about what drives anxious attachment. It's often this deep-seated fear of abandonment, right? And a constant sort of desperate need for validation from outside yourself to feel okay, to regulate your self-worth.
Okay.
So if you have that pattern, the idea of getting close to a real imperfect person, someone who could actually see your flaws and, maybe reject you, that's terrifying.
But the fantasy person, the limerent object in your head,
Totally safe. They can't reject you because, well, they only do and say what you project onto them in your mind. They're like a reliable vending machine for feeling good about yourself.
so they become a tool for self-worth regulation.
Bingo. And this brings us to a really provocative idea about the emotional truth of limerence. It can essentially become a form of, emotional masturbation.
Okay, let's pause there. That's a strong phrase. Unpack that a bit.
Mm.
How is limerence self-serving in that way?
It sounds harsh, but it's insightful. You're essentially using the idea of someone else, maybe their perceived perfection, their status, their supposed kindness. You're using that idea to confirm something you desperately want to believe about yourself.
Like what?
Like the underlying thought process is often, if this amazing, perfect, desirable person loves me or validates me or even just notices me, then I must be okay. I must be worthy of love.
So the whole chase isn't really about them. It's about getting that external thumbs up to feel good about yourself.
Exactly. The focus is entirely on getting external validation to prop up your own shaky sense of self-worth. And that self-worth is inherently unstable because it totally depends on how that other person acts or reacts.
So you're not really seeking connection with them. You're seeking affirmation through them. They're like a really shiny object you're using to prove something to yourself.
That's it, precisely. And you do this, crucially, at the expense of authentic connection. Because real connection means seeing and accepting the actual flawed person.
Okay.
And, maybe even harder, validating yourself from the inside, whether they approve of you or not. Limerence is basically a very clever defense mechanism against vulnerability.
Okay, wow. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about the physical side, the physiology, because this is where I think most of the confusion lies.
Mm-hmm.
People mistake limerence for just overwhelming attraction, right?
Totally. They think, wow, I'm just so incredibly attracted to them. This energy's insane. I can't think straight.
Yeah, this must be passion.
But the sources we looked at draw a really clear line between this mental obsession and actual grounded physical attraction. It's different.
How so?
What's really key here is that limerence is mostly a mental and anxious experience. It's this constant, exhausting loop in your head.
The movie playing over and over.
Yeah, you're fantasizing, you're rehearsing conversations, you're obsessively watching that internal film strip about what you desperately want them to do or say or feel about you. The energy feels high, yes, but it's frantic, it's buzzy, not calm.
And that frantic energy, that's the big clue, isn't it?
Yeah.
It operates squarely in the fight or flight part of your nervous system.
Exactly.
That desperate, intense feeling, the urgency, the I need to know what they're thinking right now, that's not relaxed connection. That is straight up anxiety wearing a really convincing costume.
Absolutely. Your nervous system is on high alert. Think about that urge to check your phone constantly, like every 30 seconds.
Or feeling like you have to send like 10 texts in a row because you desperately need that hit of attention, that response.
That is the biological urgency of anxiety screaming for resolution. And here's the crucial part. When your nervous system is locked in fight or flight, it's physiologically impossible to also be in a state of deep, calm connection or presence.
Wait, let's unpack that link. Why does being super anxious shut down the systems we need for real connection? Explain that biology a bit.
Okay, think about your body's priorities for survival. If there's a threat like the classic lion chasing your example, your body goes into emergency mode. Its absolute number one job is survival, escape.
Right, get away.
So it shuts down everything considered non-essential for immediate escape. Digestion slows way down, your immune system takes a back seat, and critically, the part of your nervous system responsible for calm the parasympathetic system, the rest and digest mode.
The one you need for feeling safe and connected.
That gets completely switched off, suppressed, fight or flight takes over everything.
So when we're in that urgent, anxious, limerent state, Our body is basically getting danger signals, not connection signals. Our brain's in crisis mode.
Correct. And think about what genuine sexual attraction and deep emotional intimacy require. They need vulnerability, right? They need relaxation, presence, trust.
You have to feel safe enough to let your guard down.
Exactly. You need to be grounded, present in your body. But when your nervous system is yelling, danger, need validation, and no nubby, your actual capacity to feel calm, embodied attraction, or real intimacy, it's dramatically reduced. It's just not the priority.
That makes the anecdote we read even more stark, doesn't it? The person who is so obsessed with the idea of their limerent object wanting them.
The mental strive.
But even when they were actually, physically intimate, they felt anxious. They wanted the sex to be over so they could go back to the fantasy in their head.
Yes. It's chilling, right? The real physical interaction just became material, fodder for the fantasy, as they put it.
Right.
It's another scene for the internal movie.
But they weren't really there, not present in their body.
Not at all. They were checked out, totally focused on their interpretation of what the other person must be thinking or feeling. You know, lying there thinking, oh, they must be so incredibly into me right now.
But that's just a story they're telling themselves.
Yeah.
An interpretation, not reality. It's completely disembodied.
Totally disembodied.
Okay, so if you're listening and trying to figure this out for yourself, is this limerence or is it real attraction? A good check might be asking, am I actually calm enough to feel present in my body right now?
That's a great check. If the energy feels desperate, urgent, frantic, and really focused on getting something from them, validation, a sign, whatever that anxious buzz is almost a guarantee you're in limerence territory.
Whereas genuine attraction, real connection, that's more embodied, felt when you're relatively calm and actually present in the moment with the person.
Exactly. And here's another clue. If that intense, overwhelming feeling of attraction is strongest when the person isn't there, when interaction is minimal, you are almost certainly generating that feeling yourself, internally. It's fueled by the fantasy, not the reality.
Okay, this is huge. Now we get to the really deep question.
Right.
Why? Why does our brain even bother with this exhausting, often painful cycle?
Right, because it is exhausting. And here's where it gets super interesting. Limerence rarely just appears out of nowhere. It doesn't happen randomly. It almost always serves some kind of deep, often unconscious psychological function.
Meaning our brain is trying to use this person, this limerent object, to fulfill some kind of unmet need.
Precisely. There's something the brain is trying to get or protect or avoid by creating this intense focus on another person.
So how do you figure out what that function is? What's the why behind your limerence?
The quickest way to get a clue is often to just tune into your body. When you think about that person, that limerent object, how does it make you feel? Not just the excitement, but what deeper feeling does the fantasy provide? What is that person giving you mentally that maybe you're not giving yourself?
Okay, let's break down some common functions. The first big one seems to be about seeking protection and abnegating responsibility. What does that look like?
This often involves mentally putting the person way up high, like on a pedestal.
Right, you mentioned that visualization earlier, seeing them up and to the right,
Yeah?
literally above you.
Exactly. You unconsciously view them as wiser, stronger, more capable, more knowledgeable, just generally superior to you.
Okay, but what's the payoff? Why would feeling inferior or looking up to someone feel good or serve a function?
The payoff is relief. It's permission to relax and let go of responsibility. If you believe this amazing superior person is metaphorically in charge or watching over you.
Then you don't have to be the one holding everything together.
Exactly. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to make all the hard decisions about your life. It's like you can finally exhale because someone better has the wheel. It becomes an emotional safety net.
And that fantasy shields you from the scary reality that nobody really has it all figured out.
Pretty much. It protects you from that terrifying adult realization that ultimately we're all kind of figuring it out as we go, and you do have to take responsibility for your own life path and your own choices. That's daunting. It feels much safer to mentally delegate that to someone you've idealized.
Especially maybe if you've spent your whole life feeling like you had to be the responsible one.
Oh, definitely. This pattern is really common in people who fall into compulsive caretaking roles. They feel this crushing weight of responsibility for everyone else. Limerence, by putting someone else in that superior spot, gives them a mental vacation from that burden.
And it's safe because it's just a fantasy.
Right.
You're not actually burdening the real person.
Exactly. The pedestal keeps them at a safe distance while providing the internal feeling of relief.
Okay, function number 2. This one feels really sneaky.
Yeah.
Justification of negative habits.
It is incredibly sneaky. This happens when you find yourself idealizing someone who actually shares a negative habit or trait that you struggle with yourself.
Like what kind of habit?
Could be anything, really. Maybe extreme procrastination, maybe overspending, maybe a tendency towards pessimism or unhealthy relationship patterns. But the key is, the limerent object seems to wear this habit confidently, almost like it's a cool quirk or even a virtue.
Okay, give me an example. Let's say I struggle with being really disorganized and messy, and I feel bad about it.
Okay. And then you become limerent towards, say, a charismatic artist type who lives in creative chaos, frames their messiness as part of their genius, and seems totally unbothered by it.
Ah, I see. So I start thinking.
You start thinking, wow, they're so cool and free-spirited. Maybe being messy isn't so bad after all. Maybe it's actually artistic. You elevate them, see them as superior in their confident messiness.
And the payoff is?
The payoff is you get to justify your own messiness. By deciding to sort of mentally follow their path, you give yourself permission to continue the habit without feeling guilty. It's like saying, if this amazing person does it, it must be okay, maybe even desirable for me to do it too.
Wow. And it shifts the blame too, right? If things go wrong because of the messiness later.
Exactly. You can unconsciously shift the blame or resentment onto the idealized image. Well, they made it look so cool. Rather than taking full ownership of your own choices around that habit, it's a way to avoid self-blame, even if it's totally subconscious.
And you might end up resenting the actual person later without even knowing why. Because they failed to live up to the fantasy role you gave them.
Precisely. They failed to be the perfect excuse.
Okay, the third function. This one feels very connected to attachment theory. Avoiding intimacy and vulnerability.
Yes, this is a classic one. It often involves choosing someone who is, for whatever reason, fundamentally unattainable.
How so? What makes them unattainable?
Could be anything. Maybe they're already married, maybe they live on the other side of the world. Or, much more commonly, you make them unattainable by constantly putting them on that pedestal.
By telling yourself, oh, I'm not good enough for them. Or they're too successful, attractive, smart for me.
Exactly that. You create the distance yourself with those thoughts. The goal here, unconsciously, isn't actually to get the person. It's to maintain the comfortable, safe fantasy of almost having them or wanting them from afar.
Why is that fantasy comfortable?
Because it gives you a ready-made, seemingly concrete reason for why you're not connecting. Oh, we can't be together because I'm not fit enough, or because they're too famous, or whatever the superficial reason is.
And that avoids the real fear.
It avoids the deeper, much scarier fear. The fear of genuine vulnerability, the fear of actually showing up as your real, imperfect self and risking that the other person might see you and not like what they see, or worse, reject you.
That fear of rejection is central to anxious attachment, isn't it?
Absolutely. So limerence acts like this huge protective wall. It keeps you emotionally safe. You get to feel all the intensity of love without any of the actual risk of intimacy.
And you often get to stay in that kind of comfortable victim role too, right? Poor me, I love so deeply, but they just don't see me because of XYZ superficial reason.
Exactly. It reinforces a narrative where you're the loving one and they're the unattainable prize. And that comfort, that safety, that's the ultimate trap. Because anyone you put on a pedestal like that, you automatically guarantee you can never have a real equal connection with them.
The pedestal itself creates the distance.
It's a barrier you build yourself to keep the terrifying possibility of real acceptance or real rejection safely at bay. You choose the fantasy over reality every time.
Okay, before we talk about how to break free, we have to touch on something cultural here. It suddenly makes sense why we confuse limerence with love so easily.
How so?
Well, think about how society, and especially big entertainment brands like, say, Disney, have historically portrayed romance.
Ah, right. The classic fairy tales.
Exactly. So many of those stories are built around this obsessive pursuit, right? The protagonist chasing after the idealized, often unattainable princess or prince.
And until that idealized person finally sees their true worth and reciprocates, validating their entire existence.
Yeah. It teaches us that love is supposed to be this desperate chase for external validation from someone perfect, which is pretty much the exact engine driving limerence.
That's a fantastic point. It completely romanticizes the chase, the obsession, the anxiety, framing it as the ultimate proof of love, when actually real, healthy adult love tends to start from a place of more internal validation and calm presence, not desperation.
So we're kind of conditioned to seek out limerence, thinking it's the goal.
In many ways, yes. The cultural narrative sets us up for it.
Okay, so the fantasy is safe, comfortable, culturally endorsed, but ultimately lonely and stunts our growth.
Yeah.
How do we actually dismantle it? How do we break free?
Well, the first step is acknowledging that you have to be willing to let go. You have to be willing to abandon that warm, comfortable mental movie.
Even though it feels good sometimes?
Even though it feels safe. You have to choose the imperfect, maybe sometimes boring reality over the perfect illusion. That's the foundational choice.
Okay, so what's the first practical strategy?
The first, and honestly, probably the most challenging strategy, is what the sources call radical honesty. But specifically, it's about rigorously, ruthlessly separating fact from interpretation.
Fact from interpretation. Okay, how does that apply? Let's talk about appreciation, because you mentioned that fuels limerence.
Right. We often hold on to these really strong feelings, appreciation, or maybe even resentment about someone, but we don't express them clearly or ground them in reality. We just feel them internally.
And that creates expectation.
Massive, unspoken expectations. Let's say they did one nice thing. Maybe they helped you carry a heavy box once. Your limerent brain takes that single action, runs with it, assigns a huge motive.
Like, wow, they must really care about me deeply. They're so supportive.
Exactly. You invent this whole internal narrative about their deep caring, and now you unconsciously expect them to always fulfill that deeply caring helper role you just assigned them in your head.
And when they inevitably don't, because they never actually signed up for that role.
You get disproportionately frustrated, or confused, or resentful, even though the failure only happened relative to the fantasy script you wrote.
So the radical honesty solution is,
You express appreciation and also process resentment based only on observable facts. What did the person concretely, tangibly do in reality? Not what you think it meant, or what you interpreted their motives or feelings to be.
this sounds hard, and maybe a little cold.
It feels incredibly hard. And yes, it can feel cold or mechanical at first, because limerence is all about intense feeling and interpretation. This practice is designed specifically to drive a wedge between your emotional story and the actual verifiable reality.
Okay, give me a concrete example. Let's say my partner listens to me vent about a bad day at work.
Okay. The typical interpretation-heavy appreciation might be, "Thank you so much for being so supportive and loving," or "I really appreciate how much you understand me."
Right, that sounds normal.
Ah,
But those are interpretation.
those are interpretations of their internal state, supportive, loving, understanding. You can't observe those directly. What are the facts? What could a neutral observer confirm happened?
Okay, they sat there, they looked at me, they didn't interrupt.
Exactly. So the fact-based appreciation would be, "I appreciate you spending 45 minutes listening to me talk," or "Thank you for making eye contact while I explain what happened," or "I appreciate that you asked clarifying questions." See the difference? It's grounded in action.
Wow, okay, that feels very different. Clinical, almost.
It does, and our sources suggest using what they call the robot check. Imagine you're a robot, a neutral third-party observer. What can the robot record purely based on sensory data?
The robot can note, person A smiled, person B made dinner. Person C sent a text message containing these specific words.
Right. The robot cannot note person A was genuinely happy to see me, or person B cooked dinner out of deep affection, or person C's text message proves they care. Those are human interpretations, stories we add on top.
I can just hear people pushing back now, thinking, but life is about interpreting things. We're not robots.
And that's true. But the point here isn't to live like a robot forever. It's a specific exercise to break the spell of limerence, which thrives entirely on unchecked interpretation and fantasy. When you constantly rely on interpreting motive, you're essentially guessing what's inside someone else's head based on your own needs and fears. You give away your power to your own story.
So it's about reclaiming your perception by sticking to what's undeniably real.
For the purpose of breaking this pattern, yes. Let's try another one. Scenario. Someone you're limerent about gives you a compliment at work. They say your report was excellent.
Okay, limerent brain goes, OMG, they think I'm brilliant. They must be attracted to my intelligence. This is a sign.
Right. Total interpretation, robot check says.
Robot check says, person used the specific adjective excellent when referring to the document titled Q3 report. That's it. The word was spoken. Motive unknown. Fact.
Exactly. One more. You bump into them at the coffee shop, tell a joke, and they laugh.
Limerent story. They laughed. They think I'm funny. We have chemistry. They definitely want to hang out more.
Robot check.
Subject emitted an audible ha-ha sound of short duration following speaker's utterance regarding Air croissant. Fact. A laugh occurred. Interpretation. Anything beyond that is fantasy.
It sounds almost comical when you break it down like that, doesn't it? But that practice, deliberately choosing the mundane fact over the emotionally charged story, is incredibly powerful. It's difficult because our brains are wired to find meaning and motive.
But only those grounded, factual experiences can build a real connection. Everything else is just the movie in your head running away with itself.
Which leads perfectly into the second main strategy. Detaching from the narrative. This isn't a one-time thing. It's a continuous moment-by-moment practice. And fair warning, it can be exhausting at first because your brain is basically addicted to the fantasy, addicted to the story.
So how do you practice detaching?
You have to keep asking yourself, relentlessly, what has actually concretely happened between me and this person that a neutral third party, our robot friend, could write down?
Yeah.
Become your own internal fact checker.
You're like an emotional bodyguard, protecting yourself from your own brain's runaway story.
That's a great way to think about it. Everything beyond those concrete, observable points, that's the narrative, that's the interpretation, the assigned motive, the imagined future relationship. That's the limerence talking.
And when your brain inevitably starts playing that mental movie again,
You have to notice it. Acknowledge it without judgment. There's the story again. And then deliberately, gently bring your attention back. Back to the present moment, back to your physical sensations, back to the observable reality, back to the facts of the interaction.
and this means being willing to actually let go of the story, right? Even the parts that feel really good and safe.
Yes. You have to be willing to give up the perfect person in your head, the one who always understands you and never disappoints, in order to engage with the actual imperfect person in front of you. Or, if there's no real connection there, to disengage from the fantasy altogether.
You're essentially trading a flawless illusion for a flawed reality.
Because, and this is the tough truth about connection, real relationships, real bonds, only happen in shared reality, not in these one-sided fantasies we build in our heads.
So if you feel this incredibly intense connection to someone, but they don't seem to feel it back, or the actual interactions are minimal or confusing,
You are almost certainly inventing qualities or intentions for them that they don't actually possess. You're projecting a function onto them. Protection, justification, whatever it is, and that projection is what's keeping you stuck in the limerence, not actual connection.
which means ultimately we have to embrace vulnerability.
Absolutely. Real connection demands showing up as your real self, your adult self. Taking responsibility for your own feelings, your own needs, and being brave enough to be truly seen, flaws and all.
And it means accepting that the real person, well, they're not going to follow your fantasy script.
Not a chance. They will disappoint you sometimes. They won't always say or do what the idealized version in your head would. They might not give you the attention or validation your anxious brain is craving in that moment.
And you have to be okay with that. Process that disappointment internally.
Yes, without blaming them for failing to be the character you cast them as in your mental movie. That disappointment is yours to manage.
So it really boils down to this fundamental choice, doesn't it?
It really does.
You can choose the fantasy. It feels warm, it feels perfectly safe, controlled, and it's profoundly lonely. It is, quite literally, how you can keep yourself emotionally isolated your entire life, by always picking the safety of your own mind over the messy reality of interacting with other humans.
Or you choose authentic connection, which is messy. It's imperfect. It absolutely requires risk, requires dropping the fantasy and the need for constant external validation. It means accepting rejection is possible. But ultimately, choosing that path, choosing to engage with the real flawed person, or choosing to let go of the fantasy entirely and face reality, that's what actually allows you to be present, to feel truly alive, to build something real.
Wow, that's a heavy choice, but a vital one. Okay, let's try and quickly recap the main takeaways from today's deep dive on decoding limerence. These are big insights.
Okay, 3 main things to hold on to. First, limerence is not the same as genuine attraction or real connection. Remember, it's primarily a relationship happening inside your head.
Fueled by anxiety, not authentic intimacy. It's a coping mechanism.
Exactly. Second, you've got to understand its protective function for you. Why is your brain latching onto this fantasy? What unmet need is it trying to fill?
Is it seeking protection? Justifying a habit? Avoiding vulnerability?
Right. Because until you address that underlying need within yourself, you'll likely just keep jumping from one limerent object to the next. It's a pattern.
And third,
Ground yourself ruthlessly in concrete reality. Use that radical honesty, that robot check. Separate observable fact from your interpretation or story. That's the key to detaching from the narrative that keeps you hooked.
Okay. So, for our listener challenge this week, we want to encourage you to try this out. Think about someone in your life right now where you feel those intense, maybe obsessive feelings. Could be a crush, could be someone else, your potential limerent object.
And for the next week, just practice this. When you interact with them, or even just think about them, try to only note down the concrete facts of what actually transpired. Keep a small journal, maybe.
What did they actually say or do? What did you actually say or do? Strictly, rigorously, without adding any interpretation about their feelings, their motives, or what it all means.
Just the facts the robot could observe. And note without judgment how often your brain wants to jump right back into telling the story, adding the interpretation.
Because just noticing that pattern, that pull towards the fantasy, that awareness itself is the huge first step. It's how you start to reclaim your attention, your mental space.
It's definitely hard work, requires real mindfulness, but we really encourage you in that journey of discovery. It's about becoming more present to your actual life.
Absolutely. And of course, the usual disclaimer. This deep dive, everything we've talked about, it's for educational and informational purposes. It's not a substitute for professional mental health advice.
Definitely not. If you're really struggling with obsessive thoughts, if this is significantly disrupting your life, please reach out to a qualified psychologist, therapist, or counselor. There's help available.
Thank you so much for joining us today as we unpack the complexities of limerence. We really hope this conversation helps you start to see where fantasy might be getting in the way of finding genuine, grounded connection in your life.
Yeah, take good care of yourselves out there, be kind to your minds, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Thanks for tuning in. If you found this podcast helpful, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Do you have any questions or want to suggest a topic? Just let us know in the comments. See you in the next episode. See you later.